Good morning. Good morning, Louise. Good morning, Kaiso. Great to have you both here.
Where is everyone?
Fall weather.
I don't know. It's crazy. Ah, there's Charlie. Good.
Good morning, Charlie.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. So this morning I'd like to share some considerations of the profundity within the simple practice of mindfulness of breathing that we do in the morning.
Harvey, your head is not showing on the video. You're kind of cut off at the neck.
I'm
Really?
showing.
What?
I see is the whole Harvey.
Me too.
Okay, it's my machine. Sorry.
It's okay. Sorry, I'm decapitated.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Okay. Sorry. My fault.
No issue. So when we're young, we develop some skill in lessening the impact of environmental threats and also subjective threats that our physiology can't really tolerate. And in psychology, we call those defenses. We learn in a way how to numb ourselves out to a certain extent. We learn that sometimes action relieves stress. So sometimes we learn that, cleaning our room is one way to feel better. So we start becoming clean nicks. Just whenever we get upset, we just start cleaning. We might notice that thinking or reading or study lessens our anxiety. Or we may just go into denial. It's not the case. Something just isn't happening. It's very, very useful to have defenses. We need them. And many of us coming into adulthood just learned that lesson a little bit too well when we were young. And we may go through our adulthood with a kind of restriction in our capacity to feel or respond or be sensitive to certain things. It will look different with every different person, but an example would be somebody comes into my office and they're in a separation and their partner's breaking their front glass window for their door, and they sit there with maybe a little bit of a grin on their face, and they say, it's not a big deal. It's actually a very, very big deal if somebody breaks the glass in your front door. It's a big violation. But one way I describe this, which I see in my therapy practice a lot, is we learn how to take the batteries out of our smoke alarms, and we don't register things that are oppressive or dangerous. Come in, welcome, have a seat. You're at the right place. You can sit on the floor, or you can sit on a chair. So as we get older, it's useful and helpful to learn how to be more aware of our experience. And one way that helps that is to become more aware of our physical experience. And meditation is one way that we cultivate that kind of sensitivity to our physical experience. And we don't necessarily emphasize it as much maybe as we should, but when we're practicing mindfulness of the breathing, we're cultivating some very, very specific qualities of mind. Specifically, I want to talk about 3 today: acceptance, non-judgmentalness, and discernment. Acceptance, non-judgment, and discernment. When we're being mindful of our breath, we accept it as it is. Our breath might be rapid, it might be slow, it might be deep, it might be long. But in our particular practice of mindfulness of breathing, we accept it as it is. That's a big deal, because if you really look at yourself and what you're doing with a lot of your life, a lot of it involves tweaking. We're always tweaking our experience and trying to be something different. Now, there's a place for that, and we do a fair bit of practice in Buddhism where we're trying to cultivate certain states. It's important to acknowledge that. But that's always balanced with us checking in on what is in fact occurring when I do something. Can I be aware of what is happening right now? I always like to emphasize, because it's kind of so mind-blowing, the past really doesn't exist, and the future doesn't really exist. And what's happening right now is the sum total of our actual experience. If we can accept something right now, that's an enormous step. There's so much pressure in our culture to move forward. What will happen tomorrow? What will happen 10 years from now? Will I get into college? Will I get that job that I want? Will I have the relationship I'm dreaming of? Will I die peacefully? There's always some benchmark we're setting up somewhere down the future that we'd like to pass. And if we're on, or will I achieve some kind of spiritual realization? And it's of course wonderful and excellent to have goals and aims. And to the extent that you don't have bifocal vision, you get yourself into trouble where you stop living in the present. And a healthy part of our practice is to be able to acknowledge what is present. And so mindfulness of the breathing is a kind of sine qua non of a means for developing acceptance. non-judgment. Our judgments are so deep and profound and sometimes destructive. Of course, you need the judgment of, oh, this tastes like arsenic, I'm not going to eat it. You don't want to unhinge that particular capacity. But my breath should be smoother, my mind should be more settled, I should be better at this, I'm a failure, those people are doing it better, they're ahead of me, I'm behind them, I'm ahead of them, they're behind me. The little gremlins that we all have in our minds that are judgments. And the quieter our minds are, the more subtle the judgments we can become aware of. Interestingly enough, we don't judge our judgments, we just let them be impermanent. If we're aware of something as we're cultivating mindfulness of the breath, we just let it go. Letting go is a pretty profound simplicity. A profound simplicity. Speaking for myself, I suffer from a certain amount of obsessive rumination. Have always. It's been much better, of course. But it's so interesting, the magnetism of one thought for the other, one thought for the other, the little choo-choo train of obsessive rumination. Letting it go and letting it be impermanent. And it might be, this choo-choo train has got 100 cars. What if Kroger's doesn't have the peaches that I need? Where will I find the peaches? What's a good store that has peaches? I need peaches for this cobbler that I'm making. I've got guests coming. What will they think of me if I don't make the best cobbler in the world? They made the best cobbler, whatever it is. We see that choo-choo train. We just let it impermanent. We let go of it. We come back to the breathing. That skill grows as we cultivate meditation. It's not a small skill, but it's a kind of anti-muscle. It's not like you can go to the mirror. If we push weights, we can look in the mirror and we see our biceps are growing, or we put a little tape measure around them. Letting go of the choo-choo train of obsessive rumination, you got nothing to show for it. Not visibly. But what a relief to be able to just let it be. Leaves floating on a stream. And discernment. Discernment is kind of the royal road to deep realization. We want to be as clear as we can be. If we're noticing the breath at our nostrils, or in our chest, or in the dough, in the center of our belly, 3 inches, 3 or 4 finger widths within our belly, 3 or 4 finger widths below our navel. What is the process of breathing at the dough? What do I sense? Do I sense some ripple of thought? Can I just let it go gently? When we first start and one of my current themes is we really need to know where we're at in our practice. If we're just beginning to practice meditation, we probably need to be somewhat muscular in putting our attention at our nostrils or in our throat or in our belly. If we're watching the process of the breath in the belly, we really have to kind of exert some strength. That requires discernment. Am I needing sort of strong effort to keep my focus? But as we progress, we want to loosen and loosen and loosen the effort and just let less and less effort allow our focus to be steady. Because it turns out in some ways, if we get too tight, that almost seems to stimulate more distractions. The looser we can become, the less energy there is for distraction to show up. The less energy that's working, it might be easier to let go of our distractions and just let them be impermanent. But when we're first beginning, we might need some substantial effort to bring our attention back. There's a very, very deep observation in Dzogchen practice that we take the fruition or the effects of our practice as our path. What does that mean? It means that we've had any kind of experience of calm, depth, clarity. That is hopefully the base point from which we are practicing our mindfulness. It's the effect of our practice is the basis of our practice. The way we practice is to bring the results of prior practices into the field of our experience. Again, the more we proceed, the more we progress, the less and less effort is required to do that. It's more natural for us to have the effects of our practice accessible to us. And we bring that, the effects of our practice, into our practice of mindfulness. So in the chat, I've listed 3 different areas where mindfulness can be a very, very significant contribution in our daily life. And so if you want to print out what's in the chat, please feel free. But the first is drawing from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Successful Individuals. It's really how to be with other people. And it's very, very simple statement. It says, seek first to understand and then to be understood. Not just saying if we're in a relationship with somebody or if we're in an argument with somebody, if we're in a negotiation with somebody, try to understand what the other person is saying first before you respond. It's very, very easy to say that, but it's very, very hard to operationalize it. Seek first to understand and then to be understood. Somewhere else, I think Kavi has some statement about most of us go into a conversation and all we're thinking about is what points we want to make. It's okay to know what we want to say, but you're going to get a lot further if you're receptive to what other people are saying. And the practice of meditation cultivates receptivity. We're receptive to our experience. We're not chugging along trying to create something that's not there in the mindfulness meditation. We're just noticing what is, and we're taking it in very discerningly. And similarly, when we're in conversations with others, it's enormously helpful to take in what they are saying before we present what we have to say. I work with couples a lot, and I don't know, maybe 80 to 90% of the conflicts could be interrupted if one of the partners actually would say, I hear you're saying you're really upset that I came home late. Instead of, there are good reasons why I came home late. And by the way, what you did last night was so terrible. And we're off to the races. It's a form of defensiveness, argumentative. Being argumentative is a form of defense. It's not allowing the experience of what somebody else says to really permeate our own experience. Another way that mindfulness can be very, very useful is it's a practice called focusing, which just basically, it's more of an emotional skill where you tap into what's going on in your body and you listen. And a quote from Eugene Gendlin, who started this, is that every bad feeling is potential energy towards a more right way of being if you give it space to move towards its rightness. Every bad feeling is potential energy toward a more right way of being if you give it space to move toward its rightness. So what he's really very fascinatingly saying is that, no, we don't feel something's right, we feel kind of on edge. Can we listen to what is present in our body? What are we actually feeling? And can we cultivate a receptivity? What thoughts, what images, what feelings come up from what's going on in our body? And I've given you a resource if you're interested in this, Wisdom of Focusing by Ann Weiser Cornell. It's the thinnest of books. It's very, very plainly written, and it's very, very useful. I find it very, very helpful. Just to really start allowing what we experience in our body to be felt in our bodies. Mindfulness of the breathing is a great gateway for that. And finally, it's just a kind of appetizer, but I'll mention there's a link to a one-page summary of Harville Hendrix's guidelines for useful communication. It's particularly in the context of couples, but it'd be useful for any kind of communication. 3 things that he suggests: mirroring, validating, and empathy. And what's mirroring is you come in and you say, I'm feeling miserable, I really had a really hard day at work, and your friend or partner says, I hear that you're feeling miserable, you had a really hard day at work. You just let somebody know that you've heard them. Instead of, well, you think you had a hard day, I've been home with the children all day and they've been terrible, and I have a harder time than you do. You're enjoying yourself at the office. Mirroring is just letting somebody know that you've heard. Validating is entering another person's worldview and saying, oh, it makes sense that you had a hard day. You know, you've been at the office for 8 hours straight, and traffic must have been a bear. Just you validate, it makes sense. You know, you rub your nails on the wall, I go crazy. Validating is, I'm hearing you're going crazy because I know you're very, very sensitive to that sound. It makes sense to me. Not like, you shouldn't be going crazy by my scratching the wall with my nails. How many of us do that in so many varieties of ways? Telling other people not to feel what they're feeling. And finally, empathy is really putting ourselves into another person's shoes and their feelings and really saying, wow, I can sense that it's really, really tough to be in your office. You know, I can just feel how draining it is when you get 100 phone calls a day. I can feel that. That's empathy. Again, our skills of cultivating mindfulness are deepening our capacity for empathy, for tenderness. We're looking at the slightest variations and the actual experience of this subtle thing, breath, hitting our nostrils or our chest or in our belly, the movement of our belly with the breathing. We are discerning ever more subtle sensations, and we're noticing them, we're discerning them. And with that discernment comes a tenderness. And so with tenderness, there comes a capacity of understanding, oh, it must have been terrible when your boss screamed at you and told you that you did a terrible job on the paper that you wrote for him. That must have felt so painful. That's empathy. So, just to recap, we talked about 3 key features of mindfulness: acceptance, non-judgment, discernment, that we're bringing the effects of practice to our practice when we practice, and that mindfulness can allow us to be more receptive, more sensitive to our own selves and to others. It's an enormous skill that we're cultivating in a very, very simple manner. We'll take about a 1 or 2 minute break here so we can shift our YouTube things, and we'll be back shortly.